Meanwhile, South Sudanese President Salva Kiir is blaming the United States for the collapse of the most recent peace talks held in Ethiopia. President Kiir was speaking at a regional summit in Kampala and says America's arms embargo is emboldening opposition groups. CGTN's Isabel Nakirya has more from Kampala.
The arms embargo against South Sudan came 2 weeks before the start of peace talks early this February. The talks ended in a stalemate after the rebel factions demanded that President Salva Kiir be excluded from the transitional government. And now Mr. Kiir says the sanctions imposed by the U.S. was the reason the talks collapsed.
What do you think will be the incentive of the rebels, those who are carrying guns, against that country? If that country is now tied, the hands are tied behind, and then you are told to go and fight, or you don't fight, according to you. Those people don't have any incentive to talk seriously for peace. And as a result, that meeting ended without any results.
President Kiir asked East African leaders to support his government in the pursuit of peace. Mr. Kiir accused the U.S. of intimidating his government.
What I need from the member states of the East African community is to remain as a bloc, as now they are seated here. They remain as a bloc, and not to allow member states to be bullied by those who would want to cow them down so that they take whatever resources they take from the country.
South Sudan has been plunged into war for close to 5 years now, with many rebel factions forming. More than 1 million South Sudanese have fled the country to neighboring Uganda and many more displaced. Isabel, Nakirya, CGTN,
but look at me.
Kampala.
Oh, this way, and then that way?
Well, let's get you some more perspective on that now. Michael Arunga joins me live in the studio. He's an analyst on South Sudan. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, how do you view these allegations of sexual exploitation of the South Sudanese woman in this protection camp, this UN protection camp in Wow?
I would say this is rather unfortunate, because we need to look at the context in terms of the victims. These are people who are already exposed to very, very harsh conditions. They have fled their homes, not because of their willingness to leave their homes, but because of the violations of their rights within that context. And they are looking up to the UN for support. There are 6 protection of civilian sites within South Sudan, and the UN and other humanitarian organizations need to support them, need to help them to be able to survive the kind of very, very atrocious kind of conditions that they have been exposed to. So to expose them again to these horrendous kind of violations is, I would say, unfortunate, and this needs to be addressed.
Would you say it's widespread?
Yes, I would say that there have been, in the recent past, organizations, reports around other organizations that are involved in this kind of violations. We've had Oxfam in Haiti and so forth, but then for this to come up within this context, especially in South Sudan, where I've been, actually lived within those kind of contexts, sexual violations within South Sudan is rampant.
Let's talk about this, this report. The UN has also issued a damning report implicating 40 South Sudanese officers, military officers, in sexual violence and other war crimes. What should the government do then to ensure that there is justice for the victims?
There have been reports in the past, not only government but also the opposition forces, reaching out, and in Malakal, where I've been, we've had this kind of instances. I would say that the 40 need to be tried, but then to accuse them wholesale in terms of a force, I think, is unfortunate. I think within the context of a force, there are individuals that need to be brought out. We need to have
40. That's a lot.
Yes, there's a high number. They need to be tried, of course. They need to be put through the system in terms of, ensuring that this is a stop is put to this kind of atrocities. It's important to be able to address this.
Let's talk about the UN mission in South Sudan now. Do you think their credibility is now in jeopardy?
I would, having been into that kind of a context, I would not blame them wholesale, because there are certain interventions that they are involved in that are positive, including relief food, including availing water, the basic human rights. But then these kind of violations are extreme. I think they need to be addressed. It's important to be able to sort out these atrocities as it relates to especially violations for women and children. I agree with you.
So what do you think needs to be done then to bring the South Sudan peace negotiations back on track?
They have been protracted. It's, as I've said here on this show before, lots of addressing as it relates to they are bringing the different actors together. And in the context of the victims. Because when you look at this in isolation of those who are affected, then we miss the point. But then whether it's the official opposition, whether it's the head of state, they need to sit together and look at this in the context of those who are violated and the kind of conditions. I think for me, who has lived among them, I would say that when we talk about this from hotels and other high-level kind of context without the realities of what's happening within the people protection of civilian sites, then we miss the point. But they need to genuinely address the basics. They need to sit together and look at it from the context of the women and the children that are vulnerable.
Okay, thank you very much for your analysis. That was Michael Arunga there. Thank you.
Welcome.